Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to what I hope is going to become an annual event. This is Data Day, and today's program is being recorded and live streamed. So welcome to all of our audiences. My name is Elizabeth Hayden. I'm the Reference Services Supervisor here at the State Library of North Carolina Government and Heritage Library, which is part of the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. We have a great program in store for you all today. Also want to mention we are a coordinating agency of the State Data Center. Our first speaker is going to talk about the American Fact Finder and American Community Survey. Our second speaker is going to be talking about the state demographers' projections and estimates, as well as LINC and the 2020 census. If you are online and you have a question, please use the chat box on YouTube to ask the question, and we will take care of those during our Q&A time. We will be taking a break right at 10:30, and it's a 15-minute break and we'll resume sharp at 10:45. I want to introduce my first speaker. It's Michele Hayslett. She is it's a mouthful, the Numeric Data Services and Data Management Librarian at UNC Chapel Hill. She has worked here at the State Library as a demographic specialist. She's also worked as a data librarian at NC State. She is a graduate of the School of Information and Library Science in Chapel Hill. Please welcome Michele Hayslett.
Good morning. Sure about this. All right. So if you're interested in data and you have done some dabbling in the census data, you are probably familiar with American Fact Finder. Raise your hand if you like American Fact Finder. 2, 3. Oh, hey, there's more than I expected. Many people don't like American Fact Finder. Just wait. There's a new version coming soon. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, is what to expect in the new version. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what we've been told about this new tool and the timeline for migration from the existing tools to the new platform. There's some limitations to this beta platform, so I'm going to point those out. And then I'll give you an introduction to the new interface, which doesn't really need a whole lot of introduction. It's pretty easy to use. And then I want to provide information about how to provide feedback to the Census Bureau about the development of this tool. They're very much in an iterative development pattern, so feedback that you provide now can really drive improvements to the interface. And then I'll give you some example searches. We'll see how that goes with internet connectivity. So if you have questions or if you want to see a particular search, do chat in from online any questions that you have, and we'll address questions in the Q&A. I will pause a couple of times throughout the presentation to prompt you again about sending in your questions. It's good if you go ahead and send those questions in so that we have them sort of ready to go when we get to the Q&A. So all of the Census Bureau's products are going to move to this new interface. The development of their tools has been scattered across lots of different programs and have a long history of development, and a lot of these tools have never really been updated. Data Ferret is essentially the same interface that it's been since 1995, and you can tell. So all of these tools are going to move to the new platform, and if you can see it down there, the organization within the Census Bureau that's leading that development is the Center for Enterprise Dissemination Services and Consumer Innovation, which we're pronouncing as CEDSI for the acronym. So this is how the Census Bureau has given us their timeline. Last year was all of the same platforms that they've been on. This year and next year, they're just beginning to move into the new platform, getting the platform stable enough over last year and this year to begin moving those tools into it. So the tools that are available now are really essentially just American Fact Finder, and they're using test data. So you can't really use the new platform as a replacement for American Fact Finder yet. You really want to wait and still do your official searching in American Fact Finder for now, and then hopefully in 2020 they'll have pretty much completed the Fact Finder migration into the new platform. I'm going to just keep saying platform because there's not really a name for it at this point. The tools that they have laid out for transition include the Census Business Builder, Data Ferret, Quick Facts, and American Fact Finder as the initial ones that they're going to move. And eventually they'll proceed to have all of their tools in here, including things like On the Map, which is a pretty amazing feat, all these different varieties of data that are going to fit in this one platform. I will say, in terms of where I'm getting this information, most of it comes from a webinar that the Census Bureau did back in December last year. And they had intended to do another webinar, I think in March of this year, but that never materialized. So this is the most current information that we have at this point. So what's in there? There's a good amount of ACS data, 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year data. County Business Patterns has 2 years worth of data in there. Economy-wide key statistics only has 1 year, same for the Decennial Summary File 1 and the Survey of Business Owners. As I say, there's a lot of stuff that you're not going to find in the beta version. So take some care when you're looking that what you're looking for actually is included. And they emphasize that the release should only be used for testing the platform and not for actual census answers. These are some known limitations. They don't have really anything below the county level yet, and they're expecting to add that as they do more development for mapping. Mapping is going to be down the road a little bit, but they know that people want that, and so that is going to be added. Data Ferret at this point is really the only tool that does cross-tabbing, that allows the user to choose which elements they want to appear in a table and allows the user to actually create that table in the format that they want. Data Ferret, I heard back in June that that was coming within 6 months. Still haven't heard anything about it moving, so I don't know if that's still true, but it is going to be moving. So hopefully the new interface will be a little bit easier than the old interface. They know that people also want data scraping capabilities, using the data through APIs, and so they are building that. They are building mapping capability, but those are a little bit further down the road. This is the table they presented of sort of the technical limitations. I'm not going to go through this in detail, just to point out again, they're using pseudo data here, so don't rely on the results that you find in the beta release. But just a minute or two to have a look at what these things are. The filters are an important feature of the new service. You'll see the new service interface is so stripped down that it looks like there are no options. So I'll tell you how to get to the options, because those filters can be really helpful. Okay, so this is a pause to prompt, chat in your questions. All right, so in searching the new interface, think about how you search. The goal of SEDSI in designing this new interface was really to make it as easy as possible for people who don't know census data to find something. So, in my personal opinion, I would say that it is perhaps too simple. It's kind of hard to find the hierarchies of geographies and variables that were inherent in American FactFinder, that are inherent in American FactFinder. But basically, what the Census Bureau is asking people to do is to challenge how they've designed this. So go into using the tool in just the way that you would have used American FactFinder. If you start with details, start with details. If you start with a big picture kind of approach, go with that. Test it in whatever way it occurs to you to do a search, and see if you can find stuff, and then report the results. The Census Bureau really wants feedback to get more intuitive approaches built into the tool before it goes live. So this is it. This is what the interface looks like. That's it. If you want to get to the filters, you can click on the search box, and it will give you, let's see if I've got a laser here. It will give you this advanced searched option. And when you click on that, that's how you get the filters. So this might be a little hard to see. In fact, I think I have zoomed in on the next slide on purpose. But basically, the top of the screen gives you access to the Boolean search options, which the librarians among you will remember. And then the filters at the bottom give you more options for things like geographies and years and topics in terms of like economic programs versus population kinds of topics. So this is a little zoomed in for the Boolean searching. Geez, I can't even hardly read this. So the first option is to include all of these words. The second option is exact words or phrases. The third is at least one of these words. And the last one is none of these words. And then for the filters, going across the sort of tabs at the top, topics, geographies, years, surveys, and industries. And then the topics listed just under topics, business and economy, education, employment, families and living arrangements, and health. So you get an idea of how you can sort of narrow down your search to get to more specific bits. So this is the thing. If people come to the census and they don't know very much about the census, it's going to look simple. And we all know that census data is just not simple. So for those who are used to using census data, be prepared to have lots of questions from your colleagues about, well, I got this thing, what does this mean? And I didn't find this thing, why not? I did a very simple search and it didn't find anything. Well, that might be because of the way the Census Bureau constructs their tables. It might be because the Census Bureau uses a special kind of terminology for that. So those of you who are experienced, be prepared for questions. Race, in particular, trips people up all the time. I have gotten this question in the last month, and when I first did some searching in this interface, I made this mistake myself. I went looking for race tables and got very little. Well, that's because lots of the race tables are broken out by race, so it doesn't actually use the word race in the title of the table. It uses white or black or Asian or whatever. So that's one that gets people all the time. And then, of course, I think I mentioned this already, the hierarchy of geographies and topics is not as obvious in this search interface as it has been in American FactFinder. So feedback now is really critical. As you find issues in your searching, please report them to SEDSI so that they're aware of all the issues. It's also important, though, even if you think it's such a common thing that it's going to have been reported a lot, go ahead and send it in anyway, because the more comments they get about a particular issue, the more likely it is that issue is going to be bumped up in priority to be addressed. So these are the things that they're asking people to report. What was it that you searched? What specific terms did you use? What specific options did you use in the interface to get to that point so that they can replicate what you did? And then what did you find? Did you find what you expected to find? If you did not find what you expected to find, why not? Like, what did you expect to be different? And then how could they improve it if you have a suggestion about what you expected to find? And this is the email to send feedback. Of course, because they're getting thousands of comments, you should not expect a personal response, but I think they do have an automated response that says, we got your message, so you at least know it was received. So these are some of the things that I have pointed out to them already. I found it particularly difficult to find the technical documentation. It is linked in there, but you really have to dig for it. Navigation issues, sometimes it's not always easy to tell where you should click next to get certain things, to get a particular table, or it always suggests a result based on your search, and the suggestion is, it makes sense when you think about it, but very often it is not at all related to the thing that you had in mind. So there's that. I think we'll see this in some of the sample searches. I'll wait to talk about that until then. The relevance of the tables presented very often didn't make sense to me. If I search, educational attainment, I don't expect to find school enrollment as my suggested result. Let's see, when they present those suggested results, they're just a picture. They're just a table. They're not a link to another search. So if you actually did want to pursue some of those suggestions, there's no easy way to just click on a link and go to a new search. You would have to copy, like, the table title, for instance, and run a new search on that. And then for expanded metadata, it seems to me that it would be maybe not easy, but an obvious solution for the problem with not having the word race in a table title is simply to add the word race to its metadata. And then when you search for race, all of those tables would appear. I don't have very much cataloger in me, but for you librarians in the audience, you will recognize that little bit of it. So again, send your questions by chat. So here's the demo test searches. This is the first one that I did with race and income for Orange County, North Carolina, and immediately I essentially got no results. If I switch, that did not work. I think I have to escape my presentation. Oh, here we go. So if I just search here for race, Orange County, oops. The system is rather slow. That's something else that I have reported. I assume it's because it's a beta platform. It's not. Probably they're running it on multiple servers once it goes live, and they're not doing that right now. So there you are. Here's some of the suggested results. They focused in on Orange County for the suggestions. And then when you scroll down a little bit in different screen resolutions, this will show differently. On my screen, the tables are closer to the top so you can see them. So here's some of the race alone totals. View all tables, 798 different tables. So to me, this is useful. It didn't used to do this, but this is too small. So how many people are going to catch that or be caught off guard by how small that link is? It does link to maps and to web pages as well. So the search is not going to be just for data. It's going to be for their website. So it's a one-size-fits-all kind of proposition. And then if you were to click on one of these tables, so here's the table. You have some other options down here on the left. And table notes and methodology is how they get you to the technical documentation. So I'm not going to go into that. Well, why not? We have time. So there is a link to further technical documentation and the methodology section and symbols, but this is actually pretty brief. So it does take an investment of time to go dig into those sources of how the data were collected. It does give you a breadcrumb trail to get you back to where you were. I think the breadcrumb trail was more heavily used 2 versions of American FactFinder ago, so I'm glad to see the return of it here. There sort of is one in the current American FactFinder, but I think users find that extremely useful. So I'm going to return to the main search page. Let's see. Recent income. Oh, so this is pretty good. Not so much about race. And the example is some other race. I'd be interested to know for 2010 if this is still true, but studies after the 2000 census found that most of the people who answered some other race instead of one of the specific races, it's a write-in category. So most of those people indicated that they were Hispanic, people treating the ethnicity category as a racial category. And it was a high percentage, like 97%. So if that still holds true, then this is really not about race and more about ethnicity. So just some of the results that you would get with this search. Okay. So, Alt, Tab. So, Education North Carolina is the next example. So you see that the results are pretty relevant. It seems like the profile over here on the right doesn't change very much. It's focusing on the same 3 topics each time. It's hard to tell if that might be because it's beta or if that's real, like if that's going to be the same 3 topics always. And then you have lots of different education topics. So school enrollment, educational attainment. The web pages, you would sort of expect that education and school enrollment would appear first. So there's some of those kinds of tweaks yet to be done. And you don't have the breadcrumb trail here, so you can just use your browser's back button for that. When I went searching for economics topics, these results were still fairly rough. If I'm just searching for a particular commodity like rice, I get Rice County, Minnesota. I wonder if they have rice. Do they grow rice up there? But this is where the filters can come in handy. So if I go back here and go to the advanced search, filters? Oh, there they are. So if I choose business and economy, then I can choose from other kinds of more specific things. I'm going to stick with business and economy there. Still have Rice up here. And then view all results. So still with Rice County. If you wanted national results, I'm not sure what you would do at this point. I'm going to go back to the advanced search and see if we can add a geography filter. Geographies, mid-states. So this is some of what you see when you do your searching in the beta platform. You don't quite get what you would expect, and I really would have expected that the national filter would have worked here, so that's another thing to report. But this is exactly the process that I've been going through, is taking an actual question that I had, searching in the new interface to see if I can find results, and then reporting the results, just emailing SEDSI and reporting what I found. Maybe you could make this font bigger. Maybe you could add this thing. So whatever occurs to you, whatever the feedback is, it's good to send all of it to them. Tab. I think that is all of the searching that I had to show you, but I did want to provide you with my email address. Oh, I went from the beginning. Sorry about that. Just go through. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I work in Davis Library at UNC, and I have to, of course, prioritize my UNC patrons. So if you call me during finals, I am possibly not going to respond right away. But I am available for questions from non-UNC users, from members of the public, from whomever. So if you have a question that you can't figure out, you can contact me. There's some other resources available too here at the State Library. And then all of this is based on a census webinar I think I mentioned at the beginning from last December. So this is the link to that webinar if you want to hear it from the horse's mouth. They really don't do any example searching at all, because they didn't want to prejudice people about what they would find. So it's all focused on the timeline and the limitations of the platform. But it is good information, and I do recommend having a listen if you have time. I think it's about an hour. So there you are. I'm a little short on my time, I think, but if you have questions, I'm happy to, yeah.
When you were showing searching and you weren't quite getting what you thought you would, is there an option to see something like a sitemap where it'll show you a list of tables or a list of pages, so you get an idea of, oh, well, this is what's out there that I could be looking at?
Not as far as I know. So that's good feedback. Anything else? Yeah.
Hey, Michelle, I know this is still something that's in development. In the existing versions of FactFinder, there are limitations on the numbers of like geographies that you can request at a time. And then there are those workarounds like all municipalities within North Carolina. Are those limitations still in place? Is that still part of the development for the new system? Do you know?
They haven't said anything about limitations like that. My guess is that they're going to send people to the download center to do any kind of bulk download. And the download center actually has gotten a lot better over the years so that you can be very selective about choosing existing tables from particular programs, choosing, all counties within a state or all block groups within a state. So that would be my guess as to what their solution is going to be for that. I don't know. I don't have any information at this point about limitations within this system.
For folks that have a consistent list, I'm thinking of local government users or specific planners, is there an option or is there a planned option for being able to save a criteria or save a search structure so they don't have to recreate it each time?
They didn't mention that specifically, but I would imagine that that's something that people are asking for. So I would expect that there would be something like that eventually. Anything from online?
Yes. Wondered what the schedule is for converting to the new system.
So, as I said, the slide with the schedule from the Census webinar, that actually is their graphic, indicates that by 2020, they're going to be converting American FactFinder almost fully over to the new platform, but they don't have anything more specific out at this point. The only reason I knew the 6 months figure about Data Ferret is that I was trying to find somebody to present about Data Ferret, and they were saying, we don't want to do that presentation because we're expecting that Data Ferret's going to be on the new platform within 6 months. So that's the only more recent indication I have of their timeline. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how the census differentiates race and ethnicity?
Sure. So when I think probably the Census Bureau is the only group that makes this differentiation, but the way the Census Bureau thinks about race is in terms of one's physiological construct. So whatever racial characteristics are inherent to your body, that's how they determine race. Whereas ethnicity, they think of as a sociological construct. It's not about your body, it's about the culture that you grew up in. So if you are of Asian descent, but you grew up in Puerto Rico, it is entirely possible that you could be considered an Asian race, but an Hispanic ethnicity. And that's where they are right now in terms of ethnicity. That's the only ethnicity that's being enumerated at this point. There have been some efforts over the years to lobby OMB to establish a category for Arab Americans. Bob, do you know of any others?
Yeah, there was an alternative questionnaire experiment that the Census Bureau has been running for several years over the past decade. There was a lot of recommendation, a lot of study done on adding a question for Middle Eastern, North African as a race category, the MENA standard. And that recommendation with some studies about how to clarify both the race and the Hispanic origin questions to include some write-in fields so that a person could given a little guidance through the instructions, would be able to clarify their answer. Those recommendations went to OMB, but I don't think any of them were accepted for the 2020 census. I think they'll be probably revisited after 2020.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to turn it, oh, was there another one?
I just wondered if maybe you could do, if it's not putting you on the spot, if you could do a demo of the American Community Survey.
Oh, within this interface or within?
With the old interface.
With the old interface, okay, sure.
Thank you. This could kind of give us an idea of comparison to
Yeah, absolutely.
people who are new.
Oops. I have to apologize a little bit. Having been working with the census for 18 years, I immediately go to the advanced search. But the nice thing about the advanced search is that it gives you all of your options at once. I think the guided search kind of walks you through steps a little bit more. So there is that option if you're not an experienced user. And then here's the download center. We can look at that in a minute too. So advanced search, show me all. That's exactly what I want. Your topics are listed over here in this sort of pseudo pop-up box. You can't move it around, but you can expand and collapse all of these categories to your heart's content. So let's say poverty. And I'll go for just the general poverty category. So it flies my choice up to this selections box where I can see what I have put in the box. All of your searches in American Fact Finder are, I'm blanking on the term, cumulative. So it will search for tables that match all of your criteria. So pretty frequently it happens that I have students who need information about poverty and race and household income and children of single parents. And they'll throw all of that into the search box and they won't find anything. And they come to me and say, why am I not finding anything? I know this information's in there. And I'm like, you're right, but there's not a table that has all of those topics in one place. So you have to break it out a little bit. Geographies. You can search. You see here the indentation shows you the hierarchy of these different geographies. So if you weren't sure what a block group was, you could at least know that it is subsidiary to a census tract. I'll just do county here. You can also search for a particular name or address or select it on a map. So then it's just a drill down process. Since I chose county, then I have to choose my state. Oop. North Carolina. You notice that it gives you choices here for all counties in North Carolina or individual counties. You can also select multiple counties, either click shift or click control. Add to your selections. And you can just click to a different window if you wanted to, or just close that window if you want to move on to something else. So far I'm looking for poverty in Wake County. These are all the tables that match those criteria. So there are demographic profile tables that give you a selection of a wide variety of different variables. There are subject tables. When you get down to tables labeled either B as in boy or C as in cat, those are base and compressed tables for the American Community Survey. So you can just go in and look. Let's see. I'll do means of transportation to work by poverty status. And there it presents you with people who are below 100% of the poverty level, 100 to 149% of the poverty level, and at or above 150% of the poverty level, based on, these are just the totals of the poverty categories, and then broken out further down by the type of transportation they use to get to work. I would also expect, although they haven't said anything about this yet either, that they will eventually have some options in the new system for the same kind of table manipulation that they do in American Fact Finder. Modify table will let you hide or show individual columns within a table. It'll also let you transpose rows and columns, so there's some nice features there. Bookmark and save is really helpful when you're using the same variable over and over again. It'll let you get back to that table really quickly. And then the print or download options give you either the ability to print a table as a PDF file or to download the data in like a comma-separated file so that you can actually manipulate it in another program like Excel. One thing that the Census Bureau has done pretty consistently is limit your ability to pull data across years, but they have added this feature more recently where you can jump between years for the same table. They limit your ability to do that because the methodology often changes between censuses. You know, a census is designed as a point-in-time survey, same essentially true with American Community Survey. It's not intended to track the same population in the long term. It's not a longitudinal survey. It's just looking at what things are like right now. So between years, they redesign how the questions are asked, and that can change the answers they get. So answers from different years aren't comparable over time. So that's why they have made it more difficult in the past. But they do give you a little bit of facility to do that within American Fact Finder. Questions about this interface? Yeah.
So if this table is what you wanted and you wanted to download it, is there a quick and easy way that you could document what your search criteria, which ones you used in order to create this table?
So, no. There is a quick and easy way to document what you got in terms of when you download either the data or a PDF, it will give you the metadata about that table, but it would not capture the search terms that you use to get to that table. You would essentially have to track that yourself.
I guess what I'm getting at is like something that captures exactly what is included in the table.
Well, yes. If you either download or print, it will include the entire table and the table's metadata. Other questions?
Michelle, what about comparing data from different years in American Community Survey? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, let me go back to my results page. So you notice that all of these tables are from ACS 1 year 2017 data. That's the most recent ACS that's been released that matches what I want to do. But if you scroll down and go to a new results page, and new result, let's just jump further in. Wow, there are a lot of tables there. All right, I'm jumping to the end. So eventually, it lists them all in reverse chronological order. So you eventually get to the older data that's available that still matches. What I actually wanted to show you, we will have to suggest to them that they add a way to jump to a specific page. I'll go back to the beginning. Oh, there were some. So the demographic profiles it's showing here are from the 2016 5-year data. When the ACS started in 2000, well, officially in 2005, there were 3 different types of summary files that were produced from the data. There was the 1-year data, the 3-year data, and the 5-year data. And the reason they have these different groups is because the sample sizes for each of those is different. The methodology for the American Community Survey is an ongoing rolling survey. And so when you collect data for 1 year, what you have is not a full sample size. It's only something like 13.5 million people. And that's not large enough of a sample to create estimates for the smaller geographies in the country. It's only enough to create estimates for geographies that have at least 65,000 people. So the 1-year data is limited in the number of geographies that it includes. It's only those geographies that meet that threshold. So all metropolitan areas, all states, but definitely not all counties. In North Carolina, we have something like 2/3 of our counties that don't meet that threshold. So the 3-year data is the sample that's been collected over the course of 3 years. And those are geographies, that sample size is sufficient to create estimates for geographies between 65,000 and 20,000. So we're getting smaller. A lot of counties are going to show up in that, but not all of the counties, and no smaller geographies. So you have to go to the 5-year data before you have a sample size that's big enough to create estimates for all of the administrative census geographies. Tracts, block groups, and blocks are only going to show up, well, blocks don't show up at all in the ACS data. But for tracts and block groups, those are only going to be available in the 5-year summary files. So when you're comparing, for the sake of convenience and to make the data comparable, the Census Bureau includes all of the larger geographies in the smaller summary files. So if you're looking at a tract in Wake County and you want to compare it to Wake County or the state of North Carolina, then you would want to use Wake County and the state of North Carolina data from that same 5-year summary file, because the sample size is the same as the estimate for the tract. And so that's what you would want to compare to. In terms of time, there have been changes, sort of obvious changes, over time in the American Community Survey questions. One of the advantages of running the survey every year is that you can respond to changes in what's relevant, what's important to look at in terms of society at large. And so one example of this is that the question about insurance coverage only started in 2008. And in 2008, it was a test question. It wasn't made official until 2009. In 2005, when they implemented the ACS, the budget wasn't quite as big as they needed it to be for full implementation. So the 2005 data have no information about group quarters. Group quarters are places, administrative facilities where people live in groups. That could include nursing homes, military barracks, dormitories, any place like that where people are living together in one building in groups. And those folks don't get counted by individual census forms. They're not sent individual census forms. Instead, whatever the facility is, provides the Census Bureau with their administrative records that have information in them, essentially the count of their residents. Prisons is another group quarter. So you don't get the detail that you would from an individual census form. One sort of drawback to this approach is that almost everybody who lives in group quarters has a lower income than the general population. But it's impossible to collect information about income for people who live in group quarters. So there is no real information about those folks' income. The advantage, of course, is that it's cheaper to collect information from the administrative records than from sending out individual census forms and tabulating those forms. So there's always going back and forth. So when you're comparing ACS data across time, there are sort of obvious limitations where a variable like insurance coverage only goes back to 2008. There's another example of a new variable that they've added is bachelor field of study. So for those people who have attained a bachelor's degree, what was the area that they specialized in? What was their major in college? And researchers are tying that data to eventual earnings data. So that's another really useful one. But in terms of comparing the data across time, you also have limitations in terms of methodology. So just like the census is changing, the American Community Survey is also always testing how they ask questions and better ways to get people to give answers in the categories they want. So for race and ethnicity, one of the things that they have tested is asking the ethnicity question first so that people have a chance to say up front that their ethnicity is Hispanic, and then maybe when they get to the race question, they will understand a little better that race is, as far as the Census Bureau is concerned, is about physiology. And so they won't write in some other race category, but choose one of the main categories that are already offered. That's a test thing. Whether that's actually working, I don't know.
What are there geographies in North Carolina for non-federally recognized tribes?
There are.
And can you show us what they are for North Carolina?
Ooh, show you. I don't know right off the top of my head where to look for a map.
Okay.
But I can tell you a little bit about what they look like. So in North Carolina, we have, Bob will know these statistics better than I, something like 5 federally recognized tribes. Oh, 1 federal and 8 state recognized tribes. So, for instance, the Lumbee Indians have been lobbying for federal recognition for a very long time, and they haven't gotten there yet, but I believe they do have state recognition at this point. So what happens with folks like that is that tribal lands are considered a statistical area. And so the boundaries, usually statistical area boundaries, like metropolitan statistical area boundaries, are based on county boundaries, but that's not true for Hawaiian Homelander and Native American tribes. And so instead, those statistical areas are based on a concentration of the population. So when you look at the Cherokee tribal lands in western North Carolina, what you see is scattershot. So these are places where the terrain is very rugged. There's a road that goes up into the mountains, and there are lots of little houses off this road. And so there might be a spot over here where there's part of the tribe living and a spot over here. And so that's why the map ends up looking like that. When you look at Native American homelands in the West, those tribal areas are much more based on water. And so if you're looking at a Native American homeland in Arizona, essentially what you're going to find is a square, and it's pretty much an exact square. There is a well, and then the tribal area is based around that. So you can find maps that show these areas. And I can get you to a general area where you would find it. So on the main census page, wait, this is not the main census page. This is the main census page. I really hate that they took away my A to Z index. Oh, here we go. So if you browse by topic, you can go to geography. And the geographic division at the Census Bureau is the group that makes all of the maps. And if you go to maps and data, here you can find reference maps. Thematic maps are the ones that actually show data like poverty or employment or stuff like that. But the reference maps are just like road maps. And so then I have most often used just the census reference maps, where you can get census blocks, block groups, tracts, all of that. And these are the maps that are intended to be printed at a 3-foot by 3-foot size. So when you pull them up online, they're kind of crazy. They're little tiny representations, and you have to zoom in a whole lot to see anything. But they show all of the census boundaries. So if you happen to know the counties in western North Carolina where the Eastern Band of the Cherokee reside, you would be able to go to the county maps, and on those maps you would see the boundaries for the Native American homelands. Questions about that?
Could you point out where we could find training tools at the Census Bureau?
So this is something that I struggle with a little bit. But if you go back to the main page, Let's see. Oh, here's A to Z. I finally found it. Let's see what happens if we just go to training. Training and education opportunities. So there are student opportunities as well. I think I clicked on this already. There we go. So they always list their upcoming trainings. Sometimes these are in-person appearances at a conference, or they're doing a workshop at a state data center affiliate, something like that. Often they also have webinars, and I find the webinars to also be really helpful. And for pre-recorded, not pre-recorded, but post-recorded webinars, you can look in the recorded webinars section. That's where that one is that I have the link for in my presentation. They also do trainings on a regular basis in Washington for really anybody who wants to come. They do have done some trainings that are particular to librarians, but I think those are usually routed through the Federal Depository Library Program. So I don't think those would show up here. They are also open to visiting. Budgets being what they are, their travel out to other places has been restricted over the last few years, but sometimes they still do that. Other questions?
I would like to use this as an opportunity to point out that the North Carolina State Data Center Network has an affiliate network of 45 agencies across the state, and all of those have been trained in a lot of this, and many of those are willing to host regional training workshops and things around the state. So I'd encourage anyone in North Carolina or around the country, if you're online listening to this, to get in touch with your local state data center, find out where your closest affiliates are, and they may be able to set up some training for you.
Give me your web address, I'll pull it up. Give me your web address and I'll pull it up. Look at that. Contact?
If you scroll down,
Oh.
we have there's our
Brochure.
and there's local affiliate links at the bottom,
Yeah.
right there. So that'll be a list.
Look, look. Jeff Brown at the Center for Geographic Information and Analysis, if you're doing mapping. Becky Tippett at the Odom Institute. Yeah, she is Carolina Pop Center. Yeah. And then following are the library affiliates at public libraries across the state and the councils of government across the state. The councils of government are always sort of multi-county regions, and the public library affiliates are kind of associated with those regions. So there's not one in every county, but there are people in your region who are available to help if you're not right here in Raleigh. Other questions? All right, I think that's it for me.